Hello and welcome back to Connect for Health, the wellbeing podcast brought to you by Cigna Healthcare Middle East and Africa with a little bit of help from Mental. I'm Scott Armstrong. I'm the founder of Mental, a platform designed to tackle the stigma of mental health and help us all thrive. And today is a special edition and we're talking about new research. We're talking about this, Cigna Healthcare's new wellbeing and health pulse in the UAE. It's a special report that's been looking at how the UAE population has been dealing with the situation, both in terms of heightened pressure, rising costs, and also how we're coping with home life, working from home, working remotely. So today, to dive into the findings, I'm joined by three very special guests. Firstly, we have Leah Cotterill, who is the CEO of Cigna Healthcare Middle East and Africa. To my left, we have Hana Agil, who is HR team with Cigna Healthcare. And we are joined also by Suzanne Gandy, who is head HR director at Bayut and Dubizzle. Welcome, all three.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. Now, this is a really exciting report, which I know you commissioned, I think it was at the second week into the recent tension when it kind of just began. Talk us through, Leah, just some of the helicopter findings that, you know, when you first saw these figures and how people were coping, what they said to you straight away.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. And yeah, it was the second week in April when the survey was actually conducted. So I think for me, the strongest story that comes out of this is that feeling that residents are telling us that they feel safe. They're demonstrating quite a lot of resilience, as well as optimism about the future, which, when you consider that period of uncertainty that we're talking about, is pretty good.
Because you were kind of asking them, not just after they've had time to actually kind of get used to it or normalize it or that sort of thing. This was when it was kind of fresh in everyone's minds. Many of us were, homeschooling, which is always, a challenge.
I don't want to talk about that.
Okay. He's crossed the red line 1 minute in.
Yeah, and I think for me, the results that we're seeing is really testament to this incredible social ecosystem that gives us that sense of belonging. And, I also think it reflects the great efforts and the great work of the UAE leadership, the government, the armed forces, and the public safety teams that have really reinforced that that sort of communication with us, but also that sense of safety. I think it is one of the really important things is, look, there are some really positive things. And it does speak to a resilient population, but it doesn't mean, resilience doesn't mean that there aren't problems.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important that, as employers, as part of the community, we don't overlook some of the challenges, particularly around the financial well-being pillar, that are emerging through the study. So,
you know me, I'm a stats geek. I love some of the stats. And, the first question, what do we see? We saw 89% of the respondents, nearly 9 out of 10, say that they felt physically safe in the UAE. 83% felt emotionally safe. And 86%, which I really enjoyed that statistic, that they find that they say they feel at home in the UAE. And that's kind of reflected in that other figure that really stood out. When as soon as I saw the figures, 48% of people were saying they were planning to stay here for at least 6 years, and another 21% on top of that were planning to stay for over a decade. What does that tell you about the long-term confidence? Because there's the famous phrase is "this too shall pass," and we have been navigating a period of uncertainty and high pressure. But what does that tell you about the long-term fundamentals as far as families are concerned here?
Yeah, and I think if you look at the study, it shows that family well-being is the highest scoring pillar, right? So 80% of people rate their family well-being as being very positive and cite that the family is there as a continuous source of support, regardless of what's going on. So I think that really comes back to, and I think if I remember rightly, when I quizzed the team on this, 80% of the respondents of the survey were actually married or had children.
Right.
So there could be a bit of a reflection of that, but it's also reflective of the UAE population, right? That's, the sort of general population. So I think there's a really important piece there that comes through about family.
What I loved about this was that it was a completely, wide cross section of. It was representative of all of us.
Yep.
It was different nationalities and also different emirates within the UAE as well. So you were taking a look at how everybody was kind of feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, go back to that piece around the, how long do you expect to be here? I got here in 2008 with a plan for 2 to 3 years. How many other people will tell us the same, right? And that was 18 years later. But I think, with that in mind, that reinforces the social connections that people make here, the opportunity, right, from a work perspective, the opportunity for growth, and when you have families, that quality of life, all those sorts of things that come through, starts to make it a very, very compelling place to be. And and obviously the context of the last, particularly the last 3 months, has been challenging. But when you feel like you belong and you're part of a community, actually what happens? Well, what happens is everyone goes and puts a flag above their house. Yeah. Right? As opposed to sort of, jumping on a plane or whatever that may be. So I feel like it's solidified what was already a pretty strong community. Yeah. And I think we've probably seen that in the workplace as well, Hannah, of people coming together and supporting each other.
I want to come back to you, Hannah, but I want to go to Suzanne first. I mean, it does feel like that. I think, would we call it 2-5 forever? So you're here for 2 years, he gets 5, and then that's it, you're here forever. Susan, we were talking, and before we came, and sat down on camera, you'd recently done some surveys inside, Bayut and Dubizzle. How did that reflect in terms of what you're seeing here in Cigna's findings? I mean, are these findings reflective of what you're seeing, within your teams?
Yeah, very much so. It's a beautiful reflection, actually, from what the respondents said on your survey to what our own employees said when we were reaching out to them to check in on their mental health and their well-being during this time. And we sent our survey out towards the end of March. And so we had that unique time where, people had spent some time getting used to what was going on, but also around the same time where, as an employer, we were really pushing people to, to come back to the office for their own well-being, to have that sense of belonging and togetherness that you've just been talking about. And I think that mirrors the optimism beautifully as well, because when people did get together, they were all talking about how much, they also felt safe, that they felt that the government was doing a great job. And yes, our employees also see the UAE as a long-term home. So that came out as well. But I think one of the things that I always then go, but so what, when I look at survey results? So what does that mean? And so when we were looking at why are people appearing to be very resilient during this time, and taking that view of, right, we have to get on with things and get back to work. And I think that's very much a culmination of a lot of the work that, as an organisation, we've done internally to create a strong sense of belonging. I mean, crikey, not long after everyone came back, we got a big interdepartmental football tournament going to really reinforce everyone coming together. But also the community spirit of the UAE. Yeah. So absolutely reflected.
From a HR perspective as well, Hannah, I mean, what does that, those findings around optimism, family, kind of mean in terms of how you as an employer, approach this situation with your employees? I mean, I find it really, really fascinating as well that, we know when we're isolated, that's really, really bad for our health. Yeah. And when we're isolated and at home and then constantly scrolling all the time, nervous systems are through the roof. And then if you're trying to combine homeschooling with working from home. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm tiptoeing to the red line again.
You're trying to trigger me, aren't you?
I will make you cry by the end of this podcast. To take it back to that, the lessons that HR can take from, how important family is now and how important community is now.
It made me think about, that term work-life balance that we talk about. Well, actually, it's not so much a balance. It's more work-life integration. And people are not coming to work and only working. We're not only defined by our jobs. We have a much bigger identity behind us. We have our families, our personal commitments, our financial pressures, so many different things are sitting in the back of your head. It's not just work. So from an HR perspective, it's so important to be thinking about the employee as a fully whole individual and everything that they're bringing. And it was really interesting in the survey that 69% of the respondents rated their workplace well-being positively, and 68% said they were feeling supported at work, and that's really reassuring.
That's encouraging.
Yeah. But I think when you dig deeper into the findings, that it comes up with financial pressures, additional stress, job security that people are concerned about. And so thinking as an employer and from an HR perspective, we should really be thinking about how do we provide additional support to our employees, providing them with that safe space, with flexibility, with trust, with clarity, and upskilling our managers to make sure that they are providing that support as well.
I mean, I want to kind of come to the pressures in a minute, but I just want to ask a question because it feels like there's been a bit of an evolution. It was interesting because I remember family came through really, really strongly in the annual Cigna International Health Study for the UAE. It was like the superpower for the UAE already.
Right.
But you just said there, we're not defined by our work. I mean, we go back 10 years ago, you go back to, I've been working for a while, and basically it was work comes first and family second. It feels like that's changed. And is that a fundamental thing that employees need to recognize, in that that's now a tangible thing that they need to recognize and be flexible and rather than work and everything else is just, you do that in your private time?
I think the conversation has shifted where people feel more comfortable to bring those different aspects to work. So we talk about bringing your full authentic self to work, and we're encouraging that. And so I think there's more safety or psychological safety for people to talk about the different aspects. So maybe many years ago, people felt work comes first, or maybe that's what they told their employers, or maybe that's what they felt they were required to do. Now we've got so many other responsibilities, and thinking as an employer of all the multifaceted identity that people bring to work, and making sure we understand and we give, we lead with empathy and with compassion to see if somebody has caregiving responsibilities, or giving them flexibility to, sort out whatever they need to do at home. So, I think maybe the conversations have shifted somewhat.
Does that resonate, reflect with what you're seeing within your teams? Because I remember we spoke 3 years ago, and you were talking about, look, employees really need to understand what their EVP is. What are they actually giving to employees, rather than, you're looking to have a job. But is it evolving? Is it becoming more important? Are those intangibles actually becoming tangible?
It definitely is. It's definitely evolving, and I think it's always going to continue to evolve, especially when we see only a few years ago we were sort of hit with the COVID issue and everyone was sort of behind a screen. And this situation is quite different in the fact that, we could bring people back together and we could check in on people. But I think the fact that is much more talked about as an employer's responsibility, that duty of care towards our employees in challenging times, is probably not something that historically was such a big thing that got talked about. Whereas
kind
now,
of an afterthought, rather than.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's because at the end of the day, we're also all employees, right? Yeah. And so we are in this together. And I think that's a really strong sense of identity that you get from the whole team as well, being in it together. So yes, it's talked about more. I think we have to walk a very fine line, though, as an employer, because there is that sense of, the harmony of work and private life. You don't want to, pry into someone's private life, but yet you do want them all in when they're at the office. So it is always that sort of very fine balancing act. But yes, definitely, I think it's always evolving and will continue to evolve. We learned so much during COVID. We're learning so much now. And I hope people just take the best learnings forward.
Yeah.
How does that resonate from what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, and I think exactly on that point, Suzanne, it highlights again that one size doesn't fit all, right? For individual companies or employees or leaders or cohorts of employees, right? We really, as I think back to, March, that intense period of time, the breadth of scenarios that we were thinking of about how we would support employees, employees that are living on their own, employees that preferred to leave the country, employees who had families, employees who had visitors here, employees who were stuck overseas and couldn't get back, employees who were overseas and didn't want to come back. Like there were just so many different dimensions. And as a leader and as HR professionals, we really had to contemplate how we could bring flexible, business-oriented, right? We have to make sure that what we do for our people also meets the business needs, because we have customers to serve at the same time, right? So it can't be one or the other. It needs to really dovetail together. And I think that's that fine line. And then there's the leadership role in that, right? Top down. Talking to people, communicating, little vulnerability, right? You said it. We are all, and we were, and we are still all experiencing this period of uncertainty together.
Simply turning around to your team and going, "Oh, let's just power through this," is not going to help people's nervous systems in that space.
No,
absolutely.
And it feels like two things can be true at the same time. In that and this is one of Mental and Cigna. We've talked about this for a long time. That you can support people's well-being and also ask them to perform. And even we saw this in. And I'm sorry because mate, it's the statistics again. In the annual report. 80% of employees who were surveyed said they were willing to work hard to help their companies achieve. So there's not a lack of ambition. And I think, was it 83 or 85% were enthusiastic about work, which was far higher than the global average. So actually, we've got a really engaged workforce here who deserve, in some respects, to be supported as well.
Absolutely.
You reminded me when you talked about March. I mean, there was I think I saw a meme on Facebook, which was something along the lines of, after 3 months, March has finally come to an end. But
true.
We've talked about some of the enthusiasm, the optimism, that sense of security and personal safety, but that absence, of it. Again, it's kind of like we talk about, the absence of mental illness isn't mental health, and here there are some really good fundamentals, but there are some pressure points. What were the biggest pressure points you saw coming through from this report?
So I think, as I mentioned earlier on, I think the main theme relates to financial well-being.
Right.
And as you already, Mr. Stato, pointed out,
sorry, I've got to get the figures in before you do.
That was already a point of opportunity in the end of 2025 report, in the October report. That then is amplified, right, as we come through to April. But then I think you pile on that a little bit more, and we're now concerned about job security as well. Because in the past, the conversation was about people open and looking for another role. Well, now we've turned that coin over, and not only is there underlying financial strain, but you've also got potential issues of job security, and very, very real ones, right, in certain sectors of the population. So I think that financial leads by a very long way. There are some other themes in there that are sort of emerging through, some of it in the workplace around manager support. My manager understands me. My manager cares about my mental well-being. So I think there's, that there are a few opportunities there, as well as even, you sort of raised your eyebrows. I can't remember which one of you it was, that when we said the 69% feel supported. Well, good. Pat on the back
that's
for
kind-
7
that was
out of
kind
the
of
10.
me. Yeah, I'm a bit cynical.
Yeah, but 7 out of 10. But what about the other? The other 3 out of 10, where are we as employers missing, or as leaders missing opportunities to help a broader set of the team feel supported?
It's an interesting one, because I know I work for organisations as well where the and I'm going to say they weren't the greatest of organisations, but the HR team would come with their annual staff survey and go, oh yeah, 50% of people are really, really happy. And then you go, well, how many people actually, took part in the staff survey? Oh, about 50% of the company. So what you're telling me is 25% of the company is actually really, really happy. Yeah. I mean, I find it fascinating. And again, Suzanne, you were talking before we came on the podcast as well about why this is an opportunity, because we've got, and again, you've always long talked about EVP. So, financial well-being, you along with Cigna have been talking about that for a long time, how you support and how you give the tools to employees to thrive. Yeah. But how is it, what are the challenges that employers face here? But also, what's the opportunity for employers here if they get this right, particularly right now when we're all under, there is this period of uncertainty and there is the cost of living.
Yeah. And I think everyone's feeling the cost of living, right? So it was already a conversation. And I think that sense of job security also is directly linked to the financial well-being piece. And it's that uncertainty bit that I think always heightens people's levels of anxiety. So historically, I would say that financial well-being is a pretty underdeveloped part of the employer value proposition. Yeah. And, we talk a lot about, originally it was all physical well-being, you'd have doctors coming in taking,
blood
physical
pressure.
exams. And then you had the mental well-being, and we're doing all the wellness webinars and all these different things, which is wonderful. But financial was always kind of like pushed to the back burner. Mm-hmm. And I think now more than ever, it's really important to be talking about this. And I think that it cannot just be what historically I think a lot of employers have tried to deal with, the financial aspect of the conversation around well-being is, just do another salary increase or something like that. Yeah. Let's just try and work it out like that. That's not a sustainable approach to employee financial well-being. So what we've been looking at and how we've been trying to support our teams is not just by going, okay, well, we can do this in isolation over here or this in isolation here. We're having to look at the whole employee and what is the whole employee bringing to the workplace. And when it comes to financial well-being, we're not just looking at how is somebody managing the cost of living or living within their means, but it's things like, how are they choosing the right schools for their kids that are the right, level within their cost base. So we do quite a lot of work with new joiners especially if they're coming from outside the country, as to where they can be where the best options are for them. Equally, we've done a lot on financial knowledge. Like a lot of people don't understand how credit card interest works. Oh, right.
Tell me about it. I actually went through this very recently with somebody. Yes, but yeah.
Right. So very topical. Yeah. So and we've been running sessions over sessions with our employees, how to do a basic budget and what not to forget to put into your budget, because it's that little tap that's on in the background where all your money's disappearing to, and you don't realize you've got all these subscriptions and things like that. So we've done a lot of work with our employees on that. But also, and this isn't because we had a crystal ball about this, I'd like to say, but in the beginning of the year, we said, right, what is the biggest worry? And the biggest worry for someone who's got family, and we've talked about family, is estate planning.
Yeah.
So we got a company to come in and help us, help our employees understand what are the implications of living somewhere where it's not your home country. Yeah. What are the rules? What are the legalities? And what can you do about it? So we've tried to help employees in multifaceted ways to enable them to take control. Because if they've got control, they've got more certainty. If they've got more certainty, then they've got less anxiety. And that's how we're trying to help our employees with their financial
And I think it's
well-being.
Sorry to interrupt you there, but just to pile on with lots of excitement that, but it's more caution, right? That I think it's easy to think that someone's own financial responsibilities are their own and in isolation, right? In the same way as their caregiving responsibilities are their own and in isolation. If someone has really serious financial concerns, they're going to present at work differently, right? That's going to be that's stress. That's probably lack of sleep. That's distraction. It probably impacts productivity. It probably does have a knock-on impact in the workplace. And I think that's where I go back to the manager piece, right? So we need to tool our employees to be informed and accountable, and we also need to tool our managers to be able to be looking out for the full spectrum of sort of holistic well-being factors that could be impacting an employee in the workplace, and looking at how we support them, but also recognizing that in supporting them, it doesn't mean you have a magic wand either. And that, again, there's a fine balance.
I want to bring you as well, Hannah, on this one as well, because I think one of the things that came through this Pulse survey as well, is that financial well-being isn't necessarily more money, and as the song goes, more money, more problems. But but there were
sing it for us.
I mean, it'd be a nice problem to have. But also there were other things that were also important to employees, like purpose, meaning, passion, being valued, being So how do you define financial well-being, and how important is it for the HR teams and for those who are leading talent to make sure that we get this balance right?
Yeah. I think, as both of you rightly said, employers can't step in and have a magic wand and take away any financial pressures and stress away from their employees. But what they can do is look out for those signs. Or I love these sessions that you spoke about. They're great just to give people some education and awareness, and they can navigate and take control and decide how they want to spend their money and how to budget accordingly. But if you're giving them the right education and tools, then you're just taking away some of that pressure and that uncertainty. I also think that, to Leah's point of, it does impact how you show up at work hugely. And I think us not talking about it, dare I say, is a bit of a reflection on society as well, as most of us don't feel comfortable talking about finances.
It's a little taboo, right?
It's a bit of a taboo. So
one degree or another.
Most people, it's not a topic that you come and bring to a dinner party, right? Yeah. So it's still a topic that just gets pushed aside and nobody discusses it. So actually addressing it in the workplace in the form of education sessions, planners, various resources would be hugely supportive and will lift that burden.
But that's a really interesting reflection, isn't it? If I think where we've come from, we've talked about, Scott, the fact that over the last few years, thanks to the great work that yourself and Mental and very many organizations have done here as well as globally, we can now come to the table, and maybe even the dinner party table, and say, you know what, I'm not okay. It's okay not to be okay. But you're absolutely right, Hannah. You wouldn't turn up to a dinner party table and say, you know what, I've missed my last 2 credit card payments and I'm really stressed about how I support my family at home.
It literally did come up on the dinner table, a dinner conversation the other day, where someone was going, I didn't realise that if you didn't pay back your entire credit card balance, it was 20,000 dirhams, paid 19,900 dirhams off it, but still you get charged interest on the 20,000, and it only left 100 dirhams on the card.
Okay, so I didn't know that either.
Yeah,
Hands
so
up.
that is and we went around the table, and everybody went,
wow,
and we're all managerial, or we've been around for a few decades.
We all should know better.
Yeah, and everybody was like, what? And that is literally you get charged the entire sum, not what's left on the card. So financial education. Beyond financial well-being, because the worst, let that bombshell.
Yeah, thank you.
We're all now going,
I need to go and make my credit card payment.
Talking about mental health, but that was another thing that came through, wasn't it? I mean, you're right. You said in the those statistics, and I can be a bit cynical, but you say, what about the other 30%? But employees were asking for more than just money. They were asking for some support, and it wasn't just gym memberships. Yeah. What was, what's the opportunity? What the employees are asking for or feel that they need within this survey?
Yeah, so the survey told us that they were feeling pretty positive about things like access to healthcare, actually about access to mental health care. But the gaps were in the sort of, I'm going to call it the mental well-being side of things. So some of those softer, maybe more preventive support tools that would help with, I guess, coping mechanisms and things like that. There was a little bit in there around telehealth as well. That they really wanted those sort of more social support tools, preventive support tools around mental health, specifically calling out sort of therapy and counselling, almost as this early stage, I think I could really do with a chat rather than I need help. And so I think that's actually, again, I think that's a really positive reflection of the conversation that we're now having about mental health. But is perhaps a little bit of a gap when you go to, a health insurance policy that will cover you for a diagnosis. You have things like employee assistance programs that sit in the middle. But what continues to be fascinating is that whilst there is this demand, and I don't know how many times we have just reinforced the access to this tool with our population, the utilization amongst the population remains in the 1% to 2% range. So on one hand, maybe people really don't need it, and that's absolutely fine. And I'd be delighted if that was the case. But also, I just really hope that people are, taking that step and getting the support that is available.
And that comes back to that psychological safety, but also that education about, this is what's available to you as an employee. Oh, and by the way, HR are not going to weaponize it. It's totally anonymous. So you can use it. I mean, just to frame it or give it some context, and then I'll come to you, Suzanne. I mean, you were saying literally 56% felt positive about job security, which meant that 44%.
Oh, did I get my stat wrong? Is that what you're saying?
No,
I did
I'm
say
not
that,
saying
didn't I?
No, I'm not saying that.
I think you're calling me out.
I'm saying you're right. No, I'm saying that 44% of people felt, felt that insecurity about their jobs, and there was also 44% of people in that study were saying that their job was a source of stress, regardless of the situation.
That's right.
And then there was another 44% who were saying yes, they are actually stressed about what's been happening recently in the headlines. For the employers that don't take this seriously, what's the risk? Because we were talking again, you were talking beforehand. We were having a good old national catch up. But the difference between good leaders, good companies, and poor ones, particularly in a period right now when are you a leader just for the good times? I think was something you said.
That's what we were talking about. Yeah, we were saying that when everything's going really well, poor leadership is often hidden, and when times get a bit tough, that is exposed immediately. And it also shows that the level of managers understanding their teams and being able to even identify, great managers will be able to identify those little micro behaviors that's changing in somebody that means that something's not okay. But also a really great manager will know the resources that they can point their employee to. They don't have to be the therapist, right? God forbid they are the therapist. No, that's not what I'm talking about. But you've talked about the employee assistance program. One of the things we did at work is we trained up, we went out there and we asked for volunteers to go through a training course to become a mental health first aider. And we trained up a number of our employees. It's completely confidential. It's between them and the employee. The employee can come to them. So even if the manager doesn't actually know where they exactly have to, they say, go and speak to one of the mental health first aiders. And that's like that first step in them then going on their journey to find the support that they need. But I think when you look at when times are a little bit tough, you can really see those managers who had invested a lot of time and effort previously really understanding their team members. So when something isn't right, they can immediately identify it. And there is, the return on investment of being able to do that is that you can get people back up to being at a higher level of productivity and high performance much more quickly when there's all this anxiety and everything else in the air. But the reality is it's that leading with empathy that you hit on earlier. That's so important at times like this, where everyone's got a slightly unique situation.
Yeah.
And knowing your people is critical, but also giving really purposeful work and enabling that, being able to organise the team to keep them focused and keep people busy, I think is also really important right now.
Yeah.
I think that purpose came through for us, didn't it, Hannah, during this situation? So, initial focus was employee well-being, right? Safety and well-being, and we really, jumped straight on that. But then very quickly making sure that we all reminded ourselves of our purpose and our role with our clients, our customers and our stakeholders. And that sort of almost becomes then that bonding force and purpose for everyone, that we're here for each other, but we're also here for our customers, and we have a responsibility to make sure for us that at a moment that matters during the middle of everything going on, that if you need to access care, that goes smoothly, and that's not an additional, problem or challenge in the whole sort of breadth of the situation. So that purpose and that mission, that vision, and that customer orientation was really crucial for us.
Isn't this almost like a business fundamental these days? So it's that risk versus reward of if you're looking to build a resilient company that can navigate times like this, you can't just do that today with some writing on the wall. It has to come back down to culture. And without psychological safety, without culture, all of these extra things you do mean nothing. Yeah. I'm going to ask you to respond to that, Hannah.
I'm waiting for your question.
Yeah. She said yes.
Yeah.
I said yes. No.
Then how important is it, Hannah?
No, you're absolutely right. I think
I put that in every podcast just so I get the line, someone to say you're absolutely right, because I don't get that at home.
Scott. Do you want me to say it again? You're absolutely right.
Don't worry, they'll make you cut it out.
3 times is a bit much.
Yeah.
I think you've both touched on it, of with employee well-being, of how we respond to this level of uncertainty, how we show up during difficult times. There's no one size fits all. So everyone will respond differently, and some will withdraw and will have a difficult time dealing with it. Others will see work as their purpose, their meaning. They want to get their head down. That's what keeps them busy and maybe distracted from what's happening. Yeah. And so for managers, that psychological safety that they need to build is so important, because that level of emotional intelligence that the managers will have or should have is they'll be able to assess and understand how their teams are responding, and what works well for one person may not work well for another. And they really need to feel safe and comfortable. The employees need to feel safe and comfortable to come forward and say, this is what I'm dealing with. Or not necessarily explicitly saying I'm struggling, because that very rarely happens. Actually, you need to look out for shifts in energy and communication, how they show up. So I think it's a combination of managers creating psychological safety, but also managers having a level of self-awareness and emotional intelligence to understand how their teams operate and show up and behave.
So question, you're all leaders here. I mean, how do leadership encourage that within their managers? Because, and we've seen this before as well, like in all sorts of studies, the managers, because they have responsibilities up and they have responsibilities down, often they have, 70% impact on any employee's well-being in the day. So they have an outsized oversight role, but in so many organizations, they seem to receive no training about how to actually navigate that if they're in such a critical point. So how do companies actually make sure that level in the middle can continue to function and can support? Because you're asking more of a manager than we used to do. They're no longer managers of a process.
Yeah. I think there are 2 things that come to mind here. One, yes, leadership training, and we did a leadership refresher course last year for upskilling all of our managers and making sure that they're all aware of their expectations. So yes, training is wonderful. I also think as leaders, leading by example and being good 100%. Role models sets the tone massively for your team and for those around you. Yeah. And none of us became managers or leaders overnight. At one point we were managed and led by other leaders in our careers. And so for me personally, I always I have certain managers in my mind who were role models to me, and I look up to them, and I often think, oh, they did this one. But I also know managers who didn't do it so well, right? And so you can navigate between that and having that position to be role models and leading by example. I really think sets the tone for the culture and for the organisation.
This kind of connects to what you were saying about vulnerability, or at least being human as a leader. And again, Suzanne, from within the private sector, from what you're seeing within your teams, like how do you encourage your managers, and as a leader, how do you model that? What does that actually look like day to day?
Well, I think constant communication is number one, right? Clarity, I think, is really, really important. And clarity about how is the business responding to our clients during this time. And everybody needs to know that. Whether you are at the front edge of our sales force, or whether you are doing some administration in the back office, everybody needs to understand what the clarity of the direction of the business is and the tone that we're taking in the market, because that then definitely reflects on how the employees show up each day.
Yeah.
And so what we did as an example is that we had multiple town halls with our CEO, Haider Khan. He, when we first all started getting back into the office, we were doing live town halls and live streaming them. But the live town halls kind of actively encouraged employees to come in and be together with everybody. So that was really great way of the clear communication from the top as to where we are. And it also reinforced what we are doing for our customers, how we're showing up. And that really then trickled all the way through the organization. So that meant that even as you go through the layers of the organization, everyone was clear, but then it enabled people to get their own plans of actions together and then be able to lead their teams in a much more meaningful and purposeful way. And so I think that the clear communication top down, but then also translated into actual activities day to day, is critical during challenging times, because again, it's that clarity brings down anxiety. So,
I can see you both nodding there, but it is that kind of like, and you understand, like if management or if leadership is weak inside an organisation, in a situation or in a period of uncertainty, they kind of retreat rather than actually come out and say what's needed. And also, what's the difference between organisations that talk and organisations that talk and walk, Leah?
Yeah, well, and I think that's exactly it, right? It's that tone from the top. It's showing people how to do it, as Hana said. If I think back to March, the longest month,
the year that was.
That's right. We were having daily huddles with the senior leadership group, and sometimes that was just listening. Asking a few questions and listening. There were a few specific bits of input. We had some decisions to make, but that set the tone for the day.
Yeah.
Our leaders then took that to their teams. And then to your point, Suzanne, that sort of filters through. And I think that consistency of message, the authenticity of that message, and then doing that day in, day out, and making sure that people feel that they can talk and that they are being listened to. And then we were pretty agile, right? In terms of how we would react to what was happening, our messages, and how we aligned with the team. So I think it's I don't know what the description is in terms of
we'll figure it out
of
and
answering
edit it back in
specifically
later.
your question, but it's kind of everything, right? I mean, at times of pressure and crisis, you need to come forward and become more accessible, and more communicative, more visible, and that when you've got the right culture, that brings people brings people together. You can't create a culture in a moment of crisis.
While you were talking, you were reminding me as well of, like, you come back to those headline figures of 89% people feel physically safe, 84% people feel emotionally safe. That's trust in a nutshell, isn't it? And the trust. And actually, if you remember, I mean, we were all so impressed, with Her Excellency Reem when she was, and you were like, oh my God, she is amazing. And rather than stepping away and just going, oh, right, we're not going to say anything, actually leaning in and telling everybody, even, all the way up to the president of UAE going, everything will be fine. In fact, we've quoted him, he's quoted in the report as well. So building trust, that now is tangible. And again, it comes through in periods of uncertainty that if you don't have it, you're going to struggle. So how do you build it?
Well, I'll go into that one. That's got to be the question of the day. How do you build trust at work? Yes.
How long have you got?
I was going to say this could be a podcast on its own. Look, at the end of the day, I think you can't just have any one size fits all, as we've discussed. People need to understand what the standard of the organisation is. What is the culture of the organisation, and what is it to mean to fall below that, right? So once people understand the standards of the organisation, they know what to expect, and they know what is expected of them. And the more that people turn up and they work together and they meet the expectations of each other, and there is clarity and there is no, funny business behind the scenes, trust builds. And trust builds on consistency of solid, good standards being adhered to. And one of the things that we've always been as an organisation very much an in-office environment. Yes, of course, there is a hybrid element to most workplaces, as we have. But the reality is, the more you work with someone, the more you get to know them, the more you trust them. And I think that's very difficult to build behind a screen. And I really worry, I'll be honest, with people coming into the workplace with an expectation that it's going to be, say, fully remote work. How are you learning all the stuff that happens when you're not on those meetings? How are you building trust with your colleagues through all those little conversations you have when you're not actually talking about the problem or the solution? How are you interacting with your manager just in those corridor conversations? And that, to me, is a critical factor in building trust in the workplace. It's the standards, it's the consistency, it's the everybody knowing what the expectations are, showing up and meeting them, but also being together and really getting to know each other. So when stuff like this happens, we know those employees, we can trust the employees that when we ask them to come back to the office and let's get our heads down and let's get on with things, we can trust them that they will. Equally, the employees can trust that their managers are going to continue to be consistent, going to continue to communicate with them, going to continue to manage, going to continue to assist with making sure that solid work and purpose is there. So it's something that has to be built over a period of time. But I think it's really important. As humans, we're quite social beings anyway. Even our most introverted souls in the workplace pop up every now and then and want to have that trust between them and their manager, them and their colleagues. So that's my take on how you build trust at work.
I just want to, before you respond to that as well, because we spoke before, you served in the British Army.
I did.
So what did that teach you about trust? And how does that apply to the workplace?
Again, we could do a whole podcast on that.
You've got 60 seconds. Go on.
Okay. In 60 seconds, I would say the one thing that probably what I've just said is probably the unconscious side of me popping through in the fact that we were all trained to a standard. Yeah. And we all had an expectation and an understanding of what it was to be in this team. Right? And what we could expect from each other. So when we went out on tours in not so pleasant environments, that we could trust that if someone has done a visible check of our kit, right, as we're about to go out on the road in our convoys, they've done their visual check of us, we've done their visual check of them, we know that they have the same standard as us, right? So I know that I can trust that that's been done. And I think that is the critical point that what a lot of employees now, I feel, coming into the workplace I think sometimes they don't realise how important trust is, and that it's not something that just happens. It's like, to me, planting a garden. And even once you planted the garden, you have to keep tending to the garden. You have to keep watering the garden. You have to get rid of the weeds out the garden, because otherwise it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So to me, trust is like the garden. And that's probably one of the biggest things I learned when I was serving in the military.
Yeah.
I cut you off as well. You were about to jump in.
I was going to reinforce what you were both saying, actually. I think you talked about consistency, communication, and earlier you touched on walking the talk, or, you can, as a leader, stand up and say some nice things, but if you don't actually put that into practice, follow through, that breaks down trust immediately. And it's similar within your teams, right? So when you're, if you show up one way and then you do something else the next day, or someone confides in you and shares something with you and you go and tell other people, that immediately breaks down trust. So yeah, it's that consistency piece and clear communication is key.
I think also, sorry, just to add to that, when it comes to trust in leadership, there were two key things that we were taught at Military Academy Santos. One was lead from the front. Don't ask anybody to do something that you wouldn't do yourself. Yeah. And be a servant leader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Show up for your team.
And I know that's something that you feel very passionately about as well, about being a leader that's there for their team. So let's just explore that. Because I also, I want to get to a little bit of final practical advice for anyone who's like in talent or HR or leaders who are listening in on this. But that concept of servant leadership and what that means to you, Leah.
Yeah. That for me is about the authenticity. So bringing forward who you are. I think, as you say, Suzanne, there, don't ask people to do what you wouldn't do applies in so many different, situations. As we were brainstorming what we needed to think about, putting ourselves in lots of different situations, but also thinking about how people are receiving information, their position in the organization, and what tools they have to be able to respond. So really, that empathetic, putting yourself in other people's shoes, is always been I think a Cigna way of leading across the organization, but that permeates through, right? You show people the value of that. And I think that's also important to our clients, because I think that's all, that's where that customer focus comes in, and sounds all very cuddly, doesn't it? But it's not meant to sound that. But I think I come back to that word authentic as being the central sort of pillar of building that, going back to your trust. But also of that sort of servant leadership
Even
approach.
coming down to, I love the fact you always talk about, and we've already laughed about it already, your red line, which is, oh my word, homeschooling.
Done it again.
And actually expressing that as a leader, that is a pressure.
Walk off now.
Yeah. I've only got about 5 minutes left to make her cry. But just, modelling those genuine, relatable things that we all struggle with.
That's a great word, by the way, relatable as well. I think that comes, that's that very much more human version of this sort of business word, authentic, isn't it?
It only took me 50 minutes to think of a good word.
Well done.
Just to bring us to a close, if we could have a quick game of stop, start, continue. Like if you're a leader or if you're working in an HR teams in this situation now, what do they take away from this report? What should they stop, start, or continue? What's the lesson for leaderships and HR teams from this data? I'm going to start with you, Hannah.
For managers and leaders to do more listening. Listen, check in, and really hear what the person in front of you is sharing, and look for the non-verbals too. It's not just what they are saying. Look for shifts in energy, communication, how they show up. There's, it's not just what the person is telling you verbally. There's lots of other things to look out for.
Great advice. Suzanne?
I would say that definitely being a manager there's the empathy side, but there is also the fact that I think a lot of people, when they're not comfortable as a manager or in their role as a leader, they do tend to retreat from these sorts of situations. And now is not the time for that. Now is the time to be brave, get some managerial courage, get out there, work harder for your teams than you perhaps might usually, take more interest in your teams and what is happening beyond the doors of your office. So what are they going back to what are your team members going back to when they leave the office? Are they having to deal with homeschooling? Are they looking after elderly parents? Are they isolated in an apartment on their own? I think these are all very important things from that side, but also not doing something that you wouldn't, you not asking your team to do something you wouldn't do yourself. And I think that one of the really visible things that Haida has been doing, our CEO, is he's been getting out there and meeting loads and loads of clients to listen to them, to understand how they're coping in these times, so we can better understand what we can do for our clients as well, and then translate that back into the business strategy that we move forward, which gives that clarity to our teams.
Yeah.
Mic drop moment for you, Leah, no pressure.
Oh, wow.
Let's frame it this way to bring the conversation to a close. We sit down in 12 months' time and we've got another report in our hand. What do you hope will have changed?
So we have long talked about, Scott, this correlation between employee well-being and productivity in the workplace, and in turn the success of organizations, right? Like we both firmly believe in that. This report shows us and reinforces yet again the multi-dimensional nature of well-being.
Yeah.
And particularly highlights this sort of, challenge with financial well-being right now. But there have been others in the past, right? We've looked at loneliness and stress and all these other dimensions. So I think that really making sure we take this moment again to consider the whole person and look beyond some of the high-level stats to what it's telling us beneath that, right? So there are some really positive messages, but what is it telling us beneath that? So looking at those, and then when we are following up on this, by the way, there is another report commissioned.
Brilliant.
That we will be able to, compare that evolution and see that employers have considered that fullest sort of set of holistic well-being drivers in how they're supporting their employees.
That is a mic drop moment. Thank you very much for joining us on Connect for Health today. So this is it, Wellbeing, Health and the Pulse survey for the UAE, available for download as well on Cigna Healthcare's website. So if you are in HR, if you are in talent, if you are a leader, check it out, have a look at the data. So in 6 months' time or a year, we can mark your homework and benchmark it. I've super enjoyed the conversation, as always. Thank you for the insights. I think it's a really, really powerful conversation for leaders in particular to be having right now at this time. As you say, resilient companies thrive in times like this. So Leah, Suzanne, Hana, thank you very much for joining us on Connect for Health, and we'll see you again soon.